The surge in unemployment and retrenchments as a result of the COVID-19 crisis has left many Singaporeans worried about their livelihoods. Now, between April and June, retrenchments more than doubled to 6,700 workers.
Job cuts are happening across sectors. Now, in recent weeks, European airline manufacturer Airbus let go of some of its workers in Singapore, and Singapore Press Holdings, which owns the Straits Times, announced it's laying off 140 staff from its media sales and magazines operations. Well, many readers have written to the Straits Times to find out about what happens if they are retrenched.
Burning questions, so let's bring in Assistant News Editor Toh Yong Chuan to take this further. Yong Chuan, hello. Yong Chuan, what are the most frequently asked questions that our readers have about retrenchment? What are the main concerns?
I would first say there are two broad groups of readers. One, those who are worried about whether they will be retrenched or not. And two, those who have already been retrenched or are being retrenched. So let's talk about the first group first. So for this group, of course, the biggest worry is whether can they hold on to their jobs. Now for this group, what I would recommend that they do is they should talk to their unions if they are unionized, or talk to their employers if they are not unionized. So keep the communications open, understand the business prospects, the business problems, and maybe work out with the employer some arrangements to cut costs so that they can continue working, maybe at lower pay, but at least they can keep their jobs and prevent themselves from being retrenched. So that's the first group. Now for the second group, those who have already been retrenched, I would broadly say that they have three what I would call broad rights. Now the first right is what I would describe as the right to be properly retrenched. Now under Singapore laws, retrenchment has a very strict definition. It means being made redundant, meaning the job is no more when a company restructures. Not all job losses are due to retrenchments, so that is a misconception. So sometimes there have been instances and reports of companies who try to avoid paying retrenchment benefits, so they disguise the retrenchment as something else, such as a dismissal. That is definitely not right, and the Manpower Ministry has spoken up against it. So, of course, the first right is this right to be properly retrenched and not to be subjected to things like disguised retrenchment or other forms of job losses. So that's the first right. Now, the second right is the right to be given enough or sufficient notice. Nobody likes to be told to pack up the next day, right? So under the Employment Act, there are some minimum stipulations by default. So for example, if you've worked more than 5 years, the minimum period of notice is 4 weeks. Of course, the employer can make a lump sum payment to the worker in lieu of that notice period. So that's the second right of being given the proper notice. And the third right is the most important one, the right to claim retrenchment benefit. So under the Employment Act, the law says that if you work for less than 2 years, you're not entitled. Less than 2 years, no entitlement. But if you are more than 2 years, then you're eligible and is subjected to, for example, whether your union has negotiated retrenchment benefits on your behalf with the employer, or whether it is stipulated in an employment contract. So these are the three rights: the right to be retrenched properly, the right to be informed, and for some workers, this whole issue of the entitlement to or the eligibility of a retrenchment payout.
Now, Singapore does not have a legislated mandatory retrenchment benefits scheme, Yong Chuan. This means retrenched workers do not automatically get retrenchment benefits. What are the other misconceptions that people have about retrenchment?
So let me address the issue of whether payment of retrenchment benefit is mandatory or not. The short answer is no. So even though the Employment Act says less than 2 years, if you work, you are not entitled, does not say that you are entitled, even if you work for more than 2 years. The entitlement is to the extent of whether your employment contract or the union's collective agreement spells it out or not. Now, in those instances where it's spelled out, of course, you can go to the employer and say, this is the amount that I should be paid. Now, if it's not spelled out, really, then it really depends on the goodwill of the company as well as its financial ability. So, for example, even though it's not mandatory, the Manpower Ministry says it's customary for employers to make some form of payment. The payment can range from between 2 weeks to 1 month's salary for each year of service. But also, the ministry says it depends on the company's financial ability. And given the current recession and the problems that companies face, I think it's reasonable to expect that the company's ability to make retrenchment payments will be eroded given current economic conditions.
Well, thank you so much, Yong Chuan, for coming to the show. Very helpful advice there for people who are, worried about being retrenched or who have been retrenched.